Okay, let's try a sound test. Talk, say something.
Hello, how are you today? I'm doing all right. Thank you, me. How are you? It's okay, Ralph. We're gonna do this.
I didn't
Open
mean you needed to
sesame.
have a one-man breakdown over here.
That's what you told me all those years ago.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ralph World. I am Mac, and with me, as always, is
Uncle Britt.
And today we are talking about the cultural phenomenon that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because this weekend, Wednesday actually, time of this recording, the new movie Mutant Mayhem has come out, and TMNT is really one of those things that just, I don't mean this in a bad way, but like it doesn't go away. Like it has never really taken a break since its inception in the early 80s. Britt, what is your experience with the Turtles?
Well, I want to say that it hasn't, like you said, it hasn't taken a break, and that has been for both good and bad.
Yes. Yeah.
My personal opinion, talking about the bad, the Michael Bay movies, the CG. Like, I'm not going into the whole movie itself, but the CG itself terrified me of the Turtles. Made them look like a miniature version of Godzilla.
They were, like, yeah.
But that's not a universal, or that's not just that movie either. I also kind of have that issue with the 90s movies, that the whole puppeteering aspect of it, I also think that's a little creepy too. Now that holds a little bit better because they are more charming, more campy. You can just kind of fall into it better.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when I was a kid, I thought those things were a little creepy.
See, I liked, we're talking about the 90s movies, I really liked the first one. I thought the first one was done really well. I liked the story, I liked the costumes, the puppetry, but the following ones after that, when Henson Studios, I think, sort of got away from it, and they didn't have as quality of costumes or puppets, at that point, yeah, like I can definitely see that there was sort of like an uncanny valley thing going on, especially with like the eyes and everything. The second movie I was never really a big fan of, and the third one where they went back in time to Japan, it was bad. I just really dug seeing them in samurai armor.
You beat me by a second. I was about to say the third one might be what it is, but them in samurai armor was a pretty cool highlight.
Yeah.
The second one was Secret of the Ooze, right?
Yes.
And Shredder was just kind of alive.
With no explanation whatsoever, yeah.
Yeah, I thought the 90s movies had that sort of campy charm that a lot of 90s movies have.
Mm-hmm.
But the first one for sure, good story, good acting, good puppetry, albeit a little creepy in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, that might just be a product of the time, and because of how big they were versus puppets like the Muppets that are just smaller, so there's no threat. Getting a little psychological right there, but truth be told, I've seen the 90s movies. I only really remember the first one. The other two, I actually kind of had to look up a plot synopsis just to refresh myself on what happened in them.
Totally.
But the one, my Turtles is the 2007 TMNT movie. The full, like, I think it was CG, like fully CG movie.
TMNT, and that was, I believe, supposed to be the fourth continuation of those first three movies. They sell it in the box set, which I have, and I think it was one of those situations where, like, they didn't want to go to the puppets again. CG movies were like the big thing, and I kind of liked that one, but I don't think the CG quality of it held up to the other CG motion pictures that were going on, like with DreamWorks and Pixar. Like, it did. I can't remember if that one even came out in theaters. I think it did, but that was definitely like a TV quality movie for the time.
You're asking if that one came out in theaters?
Yeah.
The only reason I can say this without having to check is because the day it came out, my cousin and my brother made this huge deal the entire day when we were visiting them about going to see the movie.
Oh, okay.
That they ended up having to lie about seeing another movie and then snuck into that movie.
Why did they sneak into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Well, because they weren't allowed to see it at the time. They were too young, according to my aunt. And so they bought a ticket for another movie, snuck in. I, unfortunately, was not invited.
Sorry.
No, you're not.
So, is that your exposure to the Turtles? Is the movies, or did you ever watch any of the series, any of the cartoon shows, of which there have been a lot, which we will be going over in a few minutes here? But
I am personally aware of 2 of the shows, and both of them are the newer ones. I know that, but I never really sat down and watched them start to finish or anything like that.
okay,
It's actually pretty similar to Star Trek with this for me. I'm predominantly familiar with the movies. I
Okay.
saw the 3 90s movies, again, to varying degrees of remembering them. But the 2007 movie was the one that really retained with me. I saw Michael Bay's movies, at least the first one. That I had enough of that fear for the second one. And then, yeah, I do want to see Mutant Mayhem. I'm actually surprised. Like, the animation looks really clean and really cool, and it actually looks unique to it. Mm-hmm. But the voice cast actually kind of turned me away when I first heard it.
why?
It just voices I wouldn't have matched with any of the characters.
Okay.
I just was like, none of this meshes to me. But up until the trailer, or then the trailer came out, and that actually turned my opinion of it a little bit.
The voice cast I don't have a problem with, especially since they have obviously cast these as some of the youngest turtles we've seen.
Like pre-teen.
Yeah, that we've seen so far. The only one that I really have an issue with, and it kind of goes back to our voice actor episode, is Seth Rogen.
Yep.
Is who is he? I think he's Bebop, or is he Rocksteady? I can't.
I think he's Bebop.
Okay. And it's like, it's just going to be Seth Rogen. And when he was Mantis in Kung Fu Panda, that was fine.
Yeah.
But like, as Donkey Kong, as Bebop, it's just going to be him. And like, that's not how I picture a big mutant warthog sounding.
And this isn't to sound like we're coming at Seth Rogen, because...
Oh, we're coming at him.
But he just seems to be... He seems to be one of the big actors that keeps getting cast in voice acting roles and then puts almost zero effort into doing a voice.
Well, he directed Mutant Mayhem.
Of course he did.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No?
Yeah, he's the director of Mutant Mayhem.
Well, see, like, I'm sure he's an alright director. I just want him to do voices. He's no Jack Black, I'll tell you that.
Who is?
Not Jack White.
Oh, Lord. So anyway, what we have here is a timeline, because we didn't mean this to turn into just a talk of the movies,
No.
but we wanted to look at the franchise as a whole. And for me, I had the rare pleasure of actually being there at like the inception. I don't mean I was at the diner where they were drawing turtles on napkins, but I was there from like the beginning. My first exposure to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was the original Mirage series. That very dark, very gritty Daredevil parody that came out for Mirage Comics, this indie comic company. And then my second exposure to them was the Palladium Books Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles RPG, which was based very heavily off of the Mirage Comics. And then came the cartoon, which is where like the animation list starts. And here we have like a timeline of Turtles on the large and small screen. That from 1987 to 1996, 9 years, the original cartoon ran.
Which is a decent time for a cartoon.
Yeah. And in the middle of that, in 1990, is when the first Turtles movie came out. 1991, Secret of the Ooze came out. 1993, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 came out. Which, those 3 movies in a 4-year time slot, for as complex as they were with the puppet costumes, which I believe was the first time, like you had Big Bird and you had Sweetums on Sesame Street, but they're
very limited.
Yeah, movement. you can't compare what they were doing there with what they were doing with the turtle costumes. That churning out 3 movies in 4 years and trying to maintain the quality of the first one, I think that had a lot to do with the deterioration of the quality in the costumes and the the movies in general.
Well, just looking at the year difference, 1990 to 1991, there's no chance you finished that first movie with nothing going for a sequel at that point. You almost had to bleed the first one into the second one to get it out like that.
But you got to remember, this was the 90s where, like, sequels were not a guaranteed thing.
Well, I know, but a year?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And then in 1997 to 1998, you had the live-action TV show, 1 year, 1 season, that was called The Next Mutation, that was actually put out by Mayhem Saban. And if nothing else, it crossed TMNT over with the Power Rangers. Which,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it also introduced Venus de Milo, one of the female turtles. It did not last long, mainly because it was what we call bad. The writing was bad. Like, the costumes weren't horrible. Like, you had to just accept that it was TV, live action TV, that there was going to be limitations that the movie costumes didn't even have. But they didn't have any of, like, the original plot lines. They didn't have any of the original villains. They just made stuff up specifically for this that, truthfully, they almost tried to make, like, Power Rangers 2.0 out of it. And it just...
So was it around this time that they did the, live tour?
That actually took place... the Coming Out of Their Shells tour,
yes.
That actually took place, like, I think around 1990 or 1991.
So right at the first movie.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where, because they had the costumes and they were like, hey, can we make portable versions of this? And then they went on tour. I had that cassette. It wasn't good, but I had it.
I've watched it on YouTube. I can second that. It's not very good.
Then after The Next Mutation, we had 2003 to 2009, a 6-year run for the second Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. That one was on, like, was it like Fox Kids or like the CW block or something like that?
Yeah, could have been Cartoon Network.
But that was actually my favorite of the cartoons. That they still tried to gear it towards kids, but this was like the first time I can remember that they thought, the audience for the Turtles is growing up. The Turtles need to grow up. That it was very, I don't want to say dark like the original comic was, but it was definitely not the original cartoon. Like, the Turtles actually used their weapons. The Foot Clan were humans and not robots. Like, there were stakes involved.
There's more mature themes throughout.
Yeah, and I'm not even saying they would go off on murder sprees like they did in Mirage Comics, but people died, so... There was that.
That's a good balance. You didn't kill a lot, but you killed a little.
So that was 2003 to 2009. 2007, TMNT came out. 2012 to 2017, a 5-year run, was the third Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, also called Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I knew this one.
I have no knowledge of this one whatsoever. This was, like, during a time where, like, Turtles sort of dropped off my radar. I didn't even know this series existed, because the one that I next became aware of would be like the one that's coming up, which was Rise of TMNT. That Tales, was that the one that was like the CG series? Like, it was a CG...
I don't think they did a CG series, but they did some, like, I think they did like a cel-shaded series. All the animation that they've done for those after the second series has all been different.
So between 2012 2017, you have Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. 2014, you have the first Michael Bay TMNT movie. And then 2016, you have TMNT Out of the Shadows.
Nightmares Return. Yeah.
Nightmares Return. Then in 2018 to 2020... you had Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which that show was actually really good. But what killed that show, and this just shows you what the show was meant to be, what killed that show was low toy sales.
Yeah.
And I honestly think it's one of those points where, like, you had just come off, like, Tales of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had just shut down in 2017. 2018 is when Rise began. Meanwhile, 2014 and 2016, you had the Bay movies. There was a lot of toys for TMNT at this time.
And they looked vastly different, too.
Right. I think it was just a matter of timing that they should have held off on Rise by a few years so that it wasn't getting muddled up with everything else that they had going on.
Because I didn't know they even had a movie. I didn't mean to cut you off right there, but I didn't know they had a movie.
Yeah, 2022, they did Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie on Netflix, which is the series finale. Like, it's meant to close off the series since they never got a proper finale for it. And now here we are at 2023 with Mutant Mayhem, and along with that is the rumor that there's going to be a 5th animated series that's going to spin directly off of Mutant Mayhem. So if that does happen, this will be the first time that like the movie and the series will align with each other. So going over all of that, that doesn't even cover video games, comic books, graphic novels, one-off series like that. That's
the tour that I brought up.
The nightmare-inducing tour.
But all of these things have built the legacy and the franchise that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which, like, we're sitting here saying it so much, but is a wild concept. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Even in the 80s, that was this is the 80s, okay? Like, even in the 80s, like, we heard that and we were like, what are you talking about? What is that? And then, like, it just took off. Like, as soon as we like got our hands on the first comics or the role-playing game, the first things that came out, like, we were hooked. Like, the I don't know if you know this, but like, did you know like the origin of the Turtles is like tied into Daredevil?
I did not.
I think it was Eastman. It was either Kevin Eastman or Peter Laird. I can't remember which one, but I think it was Eastman. Was kind of like a big fan of Daredevil. That like the ooze that mutated them in the original was very heavily implied that it was the same thing that made Matt Murdock go blind. And there's just like in Daredevil, he fights the hand ninjas, and TMNT is the foot. And even now in the modern comics, there's still parallels between like TMNT and Daredevil, that like Shredder's daughter / granddaughter, depending on which timeline, which we'll talk about that in a second too, very much looks like Elektra in it. So like they even still they're acknowledging like their unofficial ties to the Daredevil franchise.
Oh, that's cool. I never once put the two together.
If you hadn't read the Mirage comics, honestly, you probably wouldn't, because like after you got out of Mirage, that whole thing kind of like got pushed to the side.
That's fair.
What amazes me about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this podcast, what we talk about, like we typically talk about nostalgia and about how modern pop culture, modern movies, modern whatever is sort of cashing in on things that came before. Now, with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I don't think it's the same thing, because like to be able to say that you're cashing in on what came before implies that it went away at some point.
And it just hasn't.
Yeah.
We have had a series, a movie, some continuation of comic in some form. It has never stopped since it started.
Yeah.
It has just gone out of the limelight a little bit here or there when other things were going on, or it was thrown into the limelight when they were massive CGI monsters who want to kill me in my sleep. But either way, they have
those movies really.
Do you see what they look like when they take the bandanas off?
I do.
Like, that's not a normal looking face. It's not even a turtle face, dude. Like, that is the thing that jumps out of the toilet to snap your giblets, dude. Like, it's not good.
Wow. Okay.
It's okay if you like those movies. It's fine. Just know you are in my therapy notes.
Wow.
But the CGI in the 2007 movie was pretty good. It has not aged great, to be fair. But at least the practical effects of the old ones have aged a lot better.
Well, and that's what I mean by like the 2007 movie, that feels like it was originally made for TV, or like on a TV or a Nickelodeon budget, and then they said, hey, let's just put this up on the big screen. Because I know it loosely references things that happened in the other three movies, very loosely. Like,
it's
I don't,
just props, really.
yeah, I don't think it was ever done with the intention of, hey, we're going to continue this. It was just, why not?
Yeah. So, I've said this to people before, but I always thought the TMNT started as the cartoon.
A lot of people do.
I thought that was the framework, and that's what springboarded it off and everything. So much to the point that I actually thought a lot of the images that were that like harder textures and that more intense drawing aesthetic,
The black and whites.
yeah, I always thought that was fan edits or just like this one-off story of where they were like really dark or something. It wasn't up until like the past week or so that I realized that the original comic was that. It was that harder, more brutal concept.
The original Mirage comics. And like I said, that was my first experience to it, where if you've never read the Mirage comics, there's a reason it was sort of like, there's a reason it was an indie comic. There was a reason why like you really only got it at the comic shops. It was very, I hate to overuse this term, but it was fairly dark. It was fairly gritty. Like, they were teenagers, but they were still killing people. Like, the Foot Clan were still humans, and it wasn't like where Leonardo had his twin ninjakin and he would just sort of like beat somebody over the head with the flat of them and knock them out. No, he was running people through. As a matter of fact, in the first story arc, which I think the first story arc was like 4 or 5 issues. I always bought them in the trade paperbacks in those original Mirages. I couldn't find the individual floppies, so I was buying them in the trade paperback. So by the end of the first trade, which like I said, I think was like the first 4 or 5 issues, Shredder was dead.
Wow.
Like, they had killed Shredder off. And they've both gone on record like saying, we had no idea it was going to be this popular. We didn't know we were going to get more than like our 5-issue run. That after the 5th issue and people were calling us and saying, when's the next issue coming out? They were like, oh crap, we just killed off our big villain. And this was before the death of Superman. So like the big resurrection of like the dead character wasn't a trope yet. So Shredder stayed dead. What a concept.
Well, I mean, for now.
Well,
but it's funny you say that, because didn't Joker go through the same thing with Batman? He was originally introduced as like a one-off and then killed, and then he just happened to be popular, so they had to bring him back.
Yeah. And because I think Bats actually shot him, but we're not talking about that right now. So they just kept the series going, and that's when they started to introduce like all of these sci-fi elements and time travel, and then eventually they brought up Karai, which, like I said, depending on which timeline you're looking at, is either Shredder's daughter, Shredder's granddaughter, or just Shredder's descendant. But with that all in mind, that like my first experience was the Mirage comics, my second experience was the role-playing game, which being based off of the Mirage comics was just as like gritty and hardcore as the comics. I hated the first cartoon that came out. That theme song, the way they were animated, their personalities were like the very base versions of their personalities from the Mirage comics. They barely used their weapons. Like, I hated that. I hated the Turtle Van. At the time, I didn't even watch it. I just kept reading the comics. In retrospect, I understand how necessary that cartoon was to take it from this dark, gritty indie comic that was really geared towards older teens, young adults, that if they hadn't made that switch and turned it into this ultra children's franchise with these bright colors, these gimmick characters, all of the other mutants, and just turned it into this wacky, weird franchise, we would not be here today, like 30, 40 years later, still talking about them.
No, if anything, it would be us sitting here and you'd be like, you know, there's this indie run that happened a while ago. It's called TMNT. You're not going to believe what this stands for. But this is a better question for you to answer than I think. Since you've gotten to see how the franchise has changed and morphed, Where do you think it's strongest? In the more kid-centric, friendly version, or the darker, gritty, or somewhere in between where it has the room to do both stories without delving too far?
Well, this is one of the things that I think really makes the Turtles unique. As we just talked about, that between all of the comics, there was Mirage Comics, there was Archie Comics, and now they're in IDW. There were all of the animated series that the children's franchise end of it maintains Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Nickelodeon owns it now. That's their baby. They're always going to be more focused on what the kids want now, which is why I think the cartoon has changed so drastically over the years, that every time a cartoon comes out, every time a movie comes out, the whole concept of what is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is reimagined. And while there's always still the same touchstones, the four main characters, Splinter, Casey, April, Shredder, and the Foot, the world around them changes, or even how intense or how goofy the Turtles themselves are changes. I definitely think the stronger moneymaker is the children's franchise. Now, having said that, the children's side of it exists so that the more mature, I don't want to strictly say adult, but the more mature side of it does. Because another thing that I think makes Turtles very unique right now is that, not counting Mutant Mayhem, there's like, I think, 3 storied timelines going on for the Turtles right now. One of them is the standard IDW comic, okay, like their comic line, which is very much a very well balanced mix of, these are kind of the Turtles from Mirage, that like if they have to kill, they will, but they're not just like murder happy like they were in the early days of the Mirage comics. But they also have a lot of the fun and a lot of the camp and a lot of the sci-fi of like what we think of the Turtles now. One of the biggest differences of the Mirage comics, above and beyond all of the other ones, is that the Turtles all look the same and all wore the same color bandanas. And the main reason for that being was they were playing off of the whole ninja thing. That like the theory, I say theory because do any of us actually know a ninja? But like the
Let alone a turtle.
Right? The theory was that like the ninja would all dress the same, they would cover their faces, because like whenever there was time for infiltration, you never really knew how many were there. The Turtles all looking the same, wearing the same color bandanas. Even though there was 4 of them, they could make 4 look like 8. They could make 8 look like 16. You know what I mean?
Or they could make 4 look like 1.
Yeah, or that too. Whereas, like, I get why they gave them the colored bandanas, because it was kids.
Yeah.
And kids needed to be able to differentiate it. So you gave them the colored bandanas and you gave them the belt buckle with their initial on it. That the colored bandanas have become such a staple of them that if you went back, even me saying this, if you went back to them all wearing red, that might be cool if they were like, okay, we got to do this for this mission. Like, that would be like a really cool touchstone. But you kind of want to see it. Like,
it has to be a one-off.
Yeah.
It has to be something that they need a purpose to do, even if it's a weak purpose. But just some reason to push it forward, and then have them do it. Have fun with it. But at the end of the day, you need the differentiation. And truth be told, everyone has their favorite. At this point, the color is synonymous with the turtle.
Yeah.
So you can take them away and play it for a bit, but outside of that, you're not making a whole run where they all look the same.
No, because like another timeline that's going on, there's the IDW main timeline, which is pretty much like the comic version that we know and love them as right now. Then there's one that just came out a few years ago that started, that there was like a mini series that was called The Last Ronin. Do you know anything about this? I know I've told you about it before, but do you know like the history or the backstory behind it?
To my understanding, I don't know if this is right, but to my understanding, The Last Ronin is like, isn't it Leo is the last one? Or Raphael is the last one?
Well, at the beginning of the miniseries, the first miniseries, you don't know who it is. all you know is that 3 of the 4 turtles are dead. Casey's dead. Like, Splinter is dead. You suspect that April is dead. And it's basically the last turtle coming back for revenge. And he's wearing a black bandana. So even the color of the bandana, eventually you do find out who it is. In case I don't want to ruin the surprise, because like it is a really cool reveal when they find out who it is. But when the Ronin goes back to the sewer, to the hideout, and he's praying / meditating, he has all of the bandanas laid out in front of him. And if they were all red, it would not have had the same effect as going, this was Leo's, this was Donatello's, this was Michelangelo's, this was Raphael's. You know what I mean? Like, seeing all 4 of them lined up like that and knowing that 3 of them are just gone,
well,
it's chilling. It's
truth
chilling.
be told, at that point, all 4 of them are gone.
Good point. Very good point.
That's why all 4 things are down, and
he's wearing black. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Because at that point, I mean, you think of a turtle, they're not out to get revenge.
Oh no, he is.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, he's not a turtle anymore. He's not
one of the. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. But that was very, very well done. And what I liked about it was Eastman came back to IDW, and he has a hand in sort of like guiding the IDW comic with the personalities. He does a lot of alternate covers in that old style. But like, The Last Ronin was his baby. And while no word was ever officially given, it's pretty much accepted that like this is the end of the Mirage Turtles run. Like, things that they reference in The Last Ronin are direct ties back to that original run. The Turtles look a little different. They look more like we know them now. And like I said, there's the colored bandanas and everything. But like, it's exactly how like the story has to end. It is fantastic. It did so well that they're kind of franchising it now. That like, there was The Last Ronin, which was the miniseries that was the story of the 3 of the 4 plus the Master and the humans dying, and then the last survivor coming back for revenge. But now there's another series out that's called The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, that tells you what happened between the clan, the brothers dying, and then him coming back years later. Like, it fills in those years where like he just went hardcore training. Because that's the other thing, like, by the time he comes back, he's carrying all of his brother's weapons, and like he's mastered all of them. The chucks, the sai, the sword, the bow staff. So like, it further doesn't tell you anything as to which one this actually is.
I gotta ask, when you read it, was your guess right? Because I know you had a guess in your head.
I had 2 guesses. My first guess was who I wanted it to be. My second guess was realistically who I thought it was going to be. Both of them were wrong.
Wow, okay. As someone who read those comics, I'm surprised.
I don't want to say too much. I don't want to give it away, but I was wrong. That's all I'm gonna leave it at. And with the new series, what they're calling The Lost Years, not only is it showing like a flashback to what the Ronin was doing during his training before he went back to New York, it also does a 10-year flash forward where it's going to be hard to describe this without giving away too much of The Last Ronin, but like,
I mean, we can do a spoiler alert.
A new generation is being trained to take the place of the Turtles. So I really feel like this timeline, this story isn't going to end. That like, it may not get a mainstream comic, but I have a feeling that like there was the Last Ronin miniseries, and now there's the Last Ronin the Lost Years miniseries, and then like in another year there will be another miniseries talking about this new generation that is like taking their place. Like, I don't think this is going anywhere for a very long time, because it's also doing killer on the toy sales side of things. Like, I honestly think like a lot of older fans like myself did latch onto this because it was the end, and it was a very good end to the Mirage line, and now it's also kind of like continuing the story. So that's really cool, and it's happening completely different, separate from the IDW story arc. And then there is another series of mini-series for the Turtles where like they did go back in time to Japan, and now they've teamed up with Usagi Yojimbo, the samurai rabbit. So like,
Tracks.
right, there's 3 different story arcs, 3 different timelines going on in the comics, and now we have this movie coming out that how many other franchises would even dare to have this many story arcs going? Because like, everybody gets so worried that like, oh, the fans are going to get confused, they're not going to know which is which, when like Turtles is very obviously proving we can handle it. Like, what do you think of that?
If you're able to do different, not even timelines, but just different retellings of the same IP, but you do it distinctly enough that they are recognizably different,
Yeah.
but still, like, this is still Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think you should be able to do that as long as the content remains good.
Yeah.
You can over milk something, and I think we're seeing something like that with like the MCU. There's just too much, and it's suffering because of it.
Yes.
But with the Turtles, it doesn't feel like there's too much of it. It just feels like you have options.
There's something for everybody.
Yeah, like you're not gonna watch Mutant Mayhem and then go read The Last Ronin.
Right.
Like there's not a big cross reference there.
No, and like I'm definitely into the Lost Ronin series of comics. I am way into the IDW series of comics because they just had this huge event called the Armageddon Game, and I will see Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, but honestly, I'll probably wait till it comes on streaming, and that has less to do with me not wanting to see it in the theaters and more to do with me realizing I would be the only adult
Okay,
in a room full of kids, in a theater full of children.
I don't like the attitude that you're bringing right now. We would be the only adults in a room full of kids.
I apologize, I misspoke. We would be the only adults in a room full of kids. Because this movie, quite obviously, is geared
It's
towards...
a kid's movie.
Yeah, it is.
And there's nothing wrong with
No,
it. Like,
nothing at all.
Like, you need to keep things that are for kids.
Yeah.
But if you just so happen to have a mature audience with something as well, there's no shame in making that mature content along with it.
No, and I think that's one of the things, I think that is one of the things that has allowed Turtles to survive for as long as they have and continuously been in the pop culture zeitgeist, that every time, and truthfully this is more just to sell toys than anything else, but every time they're reimagined, they're basically starting from ground zero, and they're basically saying, okay, what do children watch now? What are children into now? What would make the biggest splash with kids? The fact that Rise of the TMNT, which was a very solid series, only lasted 2 years because of toy sales, tells you exactly what these shows are meant to be. But I do believe that that is what has led to the longevity, that they continuously cultivate new fan bases.
Now, you brought up toys again. You know, when I was growing up, I remember having a turtle bath toy. I don't remember what that thing did.
Where's this going? Okay.
I don't remember what that thing did, but I always had one of them.
Okay.
Pretty sure he didn't have a hand on one, but he's seen his own war.
Okay.
But the toys have almost always been around. I personally didn't get very big into the turtle toys, but I'd go to friends' houses. Dude, they'd have just so many different versions. They'd have like small ones, then they'd have giant ones, then they'd have Bebo or Bebop and all the other ones. like, the toys were impressive, and for most of them, they were pretty good toys. Like, I remember them being pretty fun to play with, even the cheap ones, because they were turtles.
Yeah.
So they always had, like, cool weapons. They always had different bandanas. So they almost became collectible even within each set because there was 4 of them.
Well, and the Playmates line, the first line of toys that came out, and it was based heavily off of the cartoon. It was based entirely off of the cartoon, let's be honest. But, like, it was really weird because, like, the toys were based off of the cartoon, but, like, the faces and the bandanas and, like, the look on their faces where they had a sneer looked like they were based more off of the Mirage comics just to match up with their personality. But I've never had many of the Turtles toys. As a matter of fact, I think I have 2 figures right now, and for some reason they're both Leonardo.
Wow, the toy collector.
Yeah, like, and they're both Leonardo, and Raphael is actually my favorite.
Wow.
I know. I don't know what's happening there. But even the toys now, there are just like so many different options that you have. That you have Playmates that are making the Mutant Mayhem toys. You have NECA that is making toys, action figures for The Last Ronin. You have NECA creating the animated cartoon action figures. Plus NECA is doing the Mirage Turtles as well. Then you have Super 7 that is basically doing everything that NECA is doing, just in their... I don't think they're doing Last Ronin. I think they're basically just doing like the cartoon and comic versions, okay? So like even in the toys, there is so many options for collectors that this franchise is huge. That's why at the beginning of this episode I said it's a phenomenon, because I can't think of any other franchise that is doing or has done what TMNT has done, and that includes Batman, because Batman has always pretty much just been Batman. But like with the Turtles, there's all these different incarnations, and like we just said, all going on at the same time.
The only franchise I can think of off the top of my head that I could say rivals it, to some degree at least, is Mario.
But that's almost strictly video game up until this year.
But there was a cartoon, there was a live action show, there was a
Super
live
Mario,
action
yeah.
movie. The games have been vastly different. And
Yeah.
I understand it's a different medium, but like Mario has been quite adaptable so far. It hasn't gone into the same routes the Turtles have, but like I couldn't say Sonic. They aren't doing enough good for them to be at this table. The only other thing I could think of is Zelda, but that hasn't changed. That's been the same game up until the newest one.
Yeah. And like with the Turtles, I feel like while they have reinvented themselves and while they have like reintroduced themselves every few years, there's always still that core to them that remains the same. Like, and I can even point it out in the Michael Bay movies, as horrifying as they were for you, that like the one scene that stands out in my head the most that tells me these are teenagers, these are all brothers, is I think it was the 3rd act of the first movie. They're in the elevator, they're all tensed up for the big fight, and then just out of nowhere they all start beatboxing.
He's hitting his nunchucks.
Leo's like clanging his katana together. Yeah.
Yeah, like in none of the versions of the Turtles did they seem to really not feel like the Turtles.
Yeah.
Like there were variants you could be like, well, I don't really like this, but you would never sit there and say, well, this isn't them. You just didn't like what this interpretation did. And that is, sorry, but that is not at all something I can say with many other franchises, if any other franchise, to be able to change that drastically from each iteration and still feel the same. My God, Star Wars couldn't even do that. And I know we come back to that a lot, but for a franchise as massive as that is, unless you seem to be able to keep it in the original theme, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Which, I guess not that it's wildly important, but the sheer fact that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as an IP or a brand has been able to branch out in such a marketing way, like, I would say for this thing, it rivals Star Wars if you want to talk marketing. Because it's just everywhere. You got toothbrushes, you got Lego figures, you got action figures, you got towels. Like, you can go out and buy a giant foam turtle head.
Well, and I think that's another thing that makes TMNT stand out from modern franchises, especially Star Wars and the MCU, is that Nickelodeon owns it. They know what the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are. They do not take it seriously. Like, they do not take themselves too seriously. That they're not afraid to go back to, like, that 80s style of marketing where, like you said, there's electric toothbrushes that have TMNT on it. There's flashlights and night lights that have TMNT on it. When was the last time you saw stuff like that for Star Wars or Marvel? Like, there's like comics, action figures, movies, and cartoons now. And like, you'll have the occasional like sheets and towels and everything, but like, just like little goofy stuff.
What I see more is that I'll see the movie, the video game, whatever, on the box, but the product itself isn't different anymore. Whereas before, you would literally get a toothbrush in the shape of like a shell or something.
Yeah.
Whereas now you just get the package that had the turtle on the box. So it's still branded, but it's not. You're not actually getting anything interesting anymore. You're just. It's just the box.
Okay.
This is coming from someone who works in grocery stores, so.
But like, I still think like what I said holds true, that like they don't take themselves too seriously.
They don't, and that is.
They're not afraid to be goofy with the IP, just like as goofy as the shows are.
And that is not something a lot of franchises seem to be able to do.
Yeah.
Like, you have to be able to respect your material. Like, you know, Doctor Who, maybe we don't make it so that the first Doctor's not the first Doctor. If you don't watch Doctor Who, I'm sorry, but you're just not going to get that one.
That's a different episode. Okay.
But, like, you can't do something like that and completely ruin what came before, but you can take it and say, okay, this is established. What if we had them in this scenario? What would they do here? And if what they would do here is make a fart joke because they're preteens, then have them make a fart joke because they're preteens. Don't rely it off of the edgy comic that came out 20 years ago.
And I honestly think that's why with TMNT, like, you'll still have some naysayers. You're always going to have you're always going to have people that are like, you ruined blah, 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 blah. But I think for the most part, that isn't said about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because it has changed so many times, because there has been so many incarnations of it. If you say this ruins Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the next question is, which version are you talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, like, what did it ruin? Oh, it ruined this one because he's not dating April in this one. All right, dude, that happened in like one comic. Let's simmer down.
Yeah. And that's why I don't understand, like, the people that are upset about Mutant Mayhem. And I do understand they're in the minority, but I still don't get it when they say, you've changed the Turtles. The Turtles change all the time.
Like, it's like they can't seem to be correct and accept it.
Yeah.
Like, you're correct. They're different. These are different Turtles. They've probably never punched a person yet.
And the thing that I kind of like about what they're doing with this, where they're starting them as preteens, which this is the youngest they've been in mainstream, because in the Mirage comics, there were flashbacks where, like, they were very young and they'd started their training. But what I like about this is, and I think Seth has mentioned that this is the intent, that for how long it takes to get these movies made, their audience is going to grow. And the idea is that from movie to movie, the Turtles are going to grow with the audience. What a concept.
That's just crazy, dude. That's crazy nonsense.
Like, as much as I was not a fan of Harry Potter, we saw that work with Harry Potter. Like, I don't like the cast grew, the audience grew, the fans grew all together. I don't understand why other movie theaters, why like other movie houses, other production companies did not get that lesson.
Honestly, that is a criticism of a lot of media as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, we could go to anime. There are shows that, like, in real life have taken 5 years to go through an arc or whatever. But, like, in the span of the show, a weekend passed.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, I get it. You're animating versus what you're animating is going to be different. But you can still have growth. Like, characters can still need to age sometimes. You can't just say, like, oh, this entire 10-season journey took place in 2 years of this kid's life. No, that didn't happen. He didn't just train for a month, beat the big bad, and then, like, train for another month, beat the new big bad. No, that didn't happen. Like, you gotta space it out to a point where it's believable.
Yeah.
And if you want to tell a new story, but they're too old in this version, guess what you do? You change them. You make them young for the next one, and you tell the story you want to tell, good or bad.
And it's just like also Mutant Mayhem, there's a lot of people that are upset that like April is the same age as the Turtles. First of all, we've seen this before. Like, I'm pretty sure in Rise of TMNT, April was just younger. She wasn't the established journalist.
I think she was still older than them, but
okay.
Yeah, it was still like ballpark age.
But in this, I like the idea that she's their same age because we've seen in the trailers, so this is no spoiler because we haven't actually seen the movie.
It's not even out yet. We can't spoil it.
Right. But we've seen in the trailers, like, the brothers wondering what would it be like to go to school? What would it be like to have friends? What would it be like to have a girlfriend? And she's sort of like their portal into that world. Like, I think that is something that, like, hasn't really been explored. Like, do they want to be normal humans? Do they want to go to school? Like, do they want to do all this stuff? Like, it's been touched on that, like, we're turtles, we're isolated, we're alone. But, like, we've never really seen them at this preteen stage going through the pressures of puberty, to be completely honest. Like,
or, you know, whatever the crap a turtle goes
right,
through at that
like,
time.
Like, I want to have friends. I want to get out. I want to go to school. I want to meet people. Like, how did they deal with that?
And, I mean, it's interesting because you're going to deal with the same isolation that they would deal with as an adult. But when you're an adult, or I guess older teenager, you can kind of write it off in this universe as hero isolation.
You're more prepared to deal with it.
Yeah. Like, there's a reason you're isolated. You have more going on than petty friendships. Not to say that they're not important, but then when you're a preteen, those friendships are the most important thing to you. Like, that's you're finally stepping out of your shell. You're getting out of the sewers. But you can't do that because you're a turtle and can, for whatever reason, do a lot of kung fu from a rat. Wild concept, man. Let's not forget this.
It's not kung fu, it's ninjutsu. Now, there have been, like, other reasons, like in the past in the comics and other shows, that, like, it's the idea that they're turtles, they're not humans, they don't have the same wants, the same desires. That can easily be written off. I can accept that. But, like, just this idea, I'm very interested in. I'm also curious to see, like, what their origin is, because the turtles have always mutated from turtles. But, like, the origin of Splinter, sometimes he's a human that was mutated into a rat. Sometimes he was the pet rat of a human master that was always a little bit more intelligent than other rats and, like, picked up on karate by watching his master. In other versions, Splinter is the reincarnation of Hamato Yoshi, who had, like, died years before. So, like, I'm curious to see what their 0 point is. Like, are they reincarnations? Are they just mutations, like, from the original comics? Like, what motivated them to do this? Because the one thing that I really, really didn't like about the Michael Bay movies, the Bayverse movies, which it wouldn't have surprised me if at one point they would have tried to cross that over with Transformers if the series had been successful.
Hey man, we could have got a G.I. Joe, Transformers, and TMNT movie.
Well, I don't even think the G.I. Joe Transformers crossover is going to happen at this point. But, like, one of the things that I really didn't like was Splinter. Like, nobody was Japanese. Like, Splinter was just this mutated rat that, like, picked up, like, a book like Ninjutsu for Dummies or something, and then just decided, hey, we're all going to learn karate. We're all going to learn to be ninja. In the original incarnation, I don't care what they say. I know this was changed. The Shredder was not Japanese in the original version. I'm fairly certain that the actor they brought in, the Japanese actor they brought in to be Shredder, was after a lot of the backlash. Because then, like, you would have had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles where, like, nobody was actually Japanese, nobody was actually a ninja, and that Shredder costume was ridiculous. That was just too much.
Yeah, look, man. All in all, not the biggest fan of those movies.
No.
They're entertaining. They have their parts.
Do they?
Not any of them with the turtles in it, really, in my opinion. But that's based on my own nightmares. I can't hold that against Bay.
All right. So, as much as they've changed, it hasn't always worked. And we're not just singling out the Bay movies, because as we talked about before, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 and 3 of the first live action series, that didn't really work either.
And truth be told, I'm not going to sit here and say the first one was a masterpiece either. I know it holds a little special place for you, or more special place for you, but like, look, it's campy. It is a campy movie. When you watch it, there are certain just 90s things you got to be like, yeah, okay. Well, I can't even say 90s. It came out in 1990. There's certain 80s things.
80s holdovers.
That you just kind of got to be like, yeah, all right, sure. It's quirky. It's campy. But it's charming. Like, that is the charm of it. Mm-hmm. But it is dated. We've gotten to a point that I will look at it and be like, this is dated. Even just the clothes people are wearing, you look at it now and you're like, wow, that kind of looks like my grandfather.
Who?
Dude, when's the last time you watched that movie?
I watch it fairly regularly.
Next time you watch it, take a special eye to the clothing in the movie. It is just...
You're talking about, like, the gang?
No, not the turtles. Just, like, the human clothing is just very 80s because it was made then.
You mean, like, the adults that have a job and dressed like they were going to work?
Yes.
See, that's a discussion for another time. Never mind. We're not even going to start that. See, for me, I still really think the original still holds up. And the main reason I say that is because that was the first time they had ever done anything like that. Like, that was actually sort of like groundbreaking for animatronics, wearable suits like that. Because then you figure the only one that I, even at the time, I thought was ridiculous was Shredder's outfit was just a little too sparkly. But when you look at that fight on the rooftop, and it's just Shredder going through them one after the other, and you take yourself out of the movie and you realize those are stuntmen wearing those costumes, doing that fight choreography. That's impressive.
I'm not to sit here and say it's a bad movie by any means. Mm-hmm. Like, it's a fun watch to sit down and go back to it. It is very charming. It's just, if you were just looking at it objectively from today to go back and watch it, I just feel it's dated.
Okay.
Now, it's dated sort of like Jurassic Park, though. Like, we're going to hit a point, and this isn't fair to say with their practical effects, but we're going to hit a point where you go back and watch it, and you're like, this is fake. Like, even remotely.
A movie is fake?
Well, I know, but you're going to just look at it and be like, this is fake, where there are some movies that you can look at and be like, this looks real still.
Huh. Okay. I think this is one point we're going to disagree on.
That's fine. Those puppets didn't do much for me. They really didn't. Needless to say, though, I think just the puppets as a whole, they're not my favorite medium to go about it. Because I think after a point, they just look dated no matter what you do. Not to say they didn't look great. I do think they looked good in the movie. Like you said, the fight was really good. They look like the Turtles. I'm not taking that away from it. Mm-hmm. Like, you look at it, and it's like, that is what the Turtles would look like in real life. It's just, maybe I don't want to see them in real life.
And I feel like the problem with the Bay, one of the other problems with, like, the Bay movies is that And I don't know if it's just because they tried to make the Turtles too busy, because like the Turtles had a lot of kibble on them.
Oh my God, they did.
And like, I think that CGI looked dated by the time it even hit the theaters.
Oh, I 100% agree.
Oh, okay.
Oh. If we're ranking these, I'll take Puppet any day.
Okay.
Yeah, no. I was just putting out my grievances with the puppets. I'm not saying they were like dog crap or anything. The CG in those movies, the nightmare fuel that they gave me, that's doggy doo-doo.
And I really do think that like they just made them way too busy. Like Leonardo had like that bamboo chest plate.
They had too much going on. They tried to make it too realistic, but because they made it realistic, but they weren't real,
it still had
all
this,
the
like,
wrinkles just, it was too much.
It had this like hyper uncanny valley feeling to it. Like the bandanas looked bad. The stuff they were wearing looked bad. It was like there was so much stuff hanging off of them that they never stopped moving. Like even if they stood still, something was still swaying or something was still like rattling together. And it was like, why they're ninjas, supposedly. They're supposed to move silently. Why would they adorn themselves with that much kibble?
Dude, you make such a good point that I never even thought about it.
Really?
Like they're supposed to be ninjas. And no.
Yeah.
Straight up no.
Yeah.
This is the movie where one of them threw themselves into a truck.
I had completely forgotten that happened. That like Raphael like cannonballed himself into a Humvee or something.
Yep, just shell first.
Yeah. Cinema.
Ah, yes. Bring Bay back. Hashtag.
So, I do like I guess wrap up at this point. Like I do think that's the Turtles. Like it's hard to say that they're cashing in on nostalgia when one, they've never really gone away, and two, they continuously reinvent themselves. They continuously reintroduce themselves to a new generation. Like if they suddenly came out with a movie, an animated movie that was based off of the Mirage comics, like from way back in the 80s, that's nostalgia. And arguably that's what The Last Ronin did too. But I don't think they've done it on such a scale as some of these other franchises have been egregious about. You know what I mean? Like, Turtles have just never gone away.
And, you know, even having said all this and our grievances with the nightmare fuel and whatnot, having said that, I still enjoyed the campy movies. I still enjoyed the Bay movie. I didn't really like the second one. But the first one had moments, like the elevator scene and everything. Yeah. It still felt like Turtles.
Yeah.
So even the ones that have failed still more or less have kept the same feeling about them. It's just everything else around it. So I think you're right. We can't sit here and say that this is even a topic perfect for our theme here, because we're really not looking back at this. We're looking at it as it's still going.
And in some ways we're looking forward, because now we're looking at Mutant Mayhem and the movie franchise that might develop into.
And the show.
And yeah, the rumored fifth animated series, that even if they don't make another animated series based on these movies, there is no doubt at all that there's going to be another series eventually. It's the pattern of this franchise. It's the way things have gone. They've never let the Turtles fall out of the public consciousness for a long time. Because like, even if we look at this, Rise of TMNT technically just ended last year in 2022 with the Netflix movie. It's only a matter of time that another series comes out on TV or streaming. That's probably the biggest decision that they're making right now. Do they put it on regular TV or do they stream it? That eventually something new is going to come out other than this movie.
Since the original cartoon, the longest gap we've gone is 6 years. And no, I'm sorry, 5 years, from 1998 to 2003.
The Next Mutation? Yeah, yeah.
That was the longest gap we've had without a either ongoing or new iteration of TMNT.
And I really think the reason that there was that long of a time gap is because the next mutation was like, it was bad. Like, it was one of those things, like, I feel like not to this extent, but like the next mutation sort of did to Turtles what Batman and Robin did to the Batman franchise before Batman Begins came out. You know what I mean?
Little sidestep miss.
Yeah, that like, okay, we need to calm down. We need to put some time in between this and the newness to get that stink off of it.
But I think as we sit right now, I don't think it's a franchise that, one, is going to slow down, and two, I don't see it going anywhere for a little while.
No.
Like, even if Mutant Mayhem is just dog garbage, and like every scene is almost unwatchable, like it is just terrible. Give it 2, maybe 3, 4 years, we'll get something else.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, we've seen this franchise weather bad ideas before. Like, I don't want to say the franchise is bulletproof, but it has legs. It has longevity. Like, the movie, if the movie is bad, I'm not saying it is, but like, if the movie is bad and they don't make the sequel and it puts the idea of a new series on hold for a while, there's still the comics out there. Like, there's always still going to be something going on with this franchise.
Yeah, we know the toys ain't gonna stop just because of a series went bad.
And there's bound to be another series of video games. Like, like that's the one thing I think nostalgia that has happened recently is that like they've re-released the original arcade games.
The semi-impossible TMNT.
Yeah, they've re-released those games both on like, you know, those what are they? The consoles that have like a bunch of different games on them that like look
the
like
retro packs.
Yeah, the retro packs. Thank you. And they've even re-released it in like stand-up cabinets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, they're pretty much gutted from what they used to be.
right.
It's pretty much just one board in there now and a TV. But
Well, how much do you need for like?
well, I know more of a thought out loud.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure my cell phone has more processing power than those arcade cabinets ever had.
Dude, the fact that you can now play Doom on a calculator, like, come on.
I know.
But yeah, all is said and done, I think TMNT started strong, and they haven't really faulted much since. Everyone makes a mistake here and two.
Here and now, here and then, now and then.
I'm interrupting you.
This is one of those moments. And I think just like they're not afraid to try something new. Now, like in the beginning, maybe they were while like the franchise was still like new, but I think that it's proven that it can weather bad decisions. So they're not afraid to try new stuff. And I think that's fantastic. And I think a lot of franchises could learn from them. Don't take yourselves too seriously. Don't be afraid to try something new.
And honestly, it shouldn't be said, but it's also just fun.
Yeah.
Like, they're just fun. Even you go to the darker iteration of it, and yeah, they're killing people, and that can be frowned upon, but even within the context of that, it's still fun. It's a fun story to read.
Yeah.
Like, too many things seem to just forget that you can just be fun. The point of it can be fun.
Yeah. Like in the comics right now, when they're traveling between dimensions, their preferred method of travel, the most efficient method of travel, and I forget what her name is, but it's basically just this giant head of a cow that is sentient, can fly through space and time, and they get in her mouth.
That makes sense.
To travel, doesn't it though?
So, just so that you all haven't lost track, again, this is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
And that has been Ralph World, everyone.